Hello, welcome to the September virtual Armory Live Talk, Collecting in Uncertain Times. We're going to leave time for questions towards the end of the discussion, so please type your questions into the Q&A section. The chat function for this talk has been disabled. I'm pleased to have our esteemed panelists join us for this discussion about what collecting has looked like for each of them over the past several months. I want to introduce them and thank them all for being here. Marguerite Hoffman is a private investor and an active nonprofit volunteer. She currently sits on the boards of the Trinity Park Conservancy, the Trinity Park Conservancy Development Corporation, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and Chip Care, a medical device company based in Toronto. She has chaired the following organizations: the Dallas Museum of Art, the Child Care Group, Planned Parenthood of Northeast Texas and Public Radio International, and is a member of Women Moving Millions and the UTSW President's Advisory Council. For over 15 years, she served on the board of Dignitas International, a medical humanitarian group working in sub-Saharan Africa. She's an investor in multiple sectors of public and private markets with a focus on technology and biotech companies. Marguerite has received the TACA Silver Cup Award for Outstanding Leadership in the Arts, the Art Table Distinguished Service to the Visual Arts Award, Planned Parenthood's Gertrude Shelburne Humanitarian Award, and was cited by Business Week magazine as one of the top 50 philanthropists in the nation. She splits her time between Dallas and Nantucket. Her latest endeavor is producing a book on her art collection entitled Amor Mundi, to be published in 2021 by Writing House. Bernard I. Lumpkin is a contemporary art collector, patron, and educator whose commitment to both emerging and established artists of African descent is part of a broader mission of institutional advocacy and support. Mr. Lumpkin currently sits on the board of trustees of the Studio Museum in Harlem and the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. At the Whitney Museum of American Art, Mr. Lumpkin serves on the Education Committee and on the Painting and Sculpture Committee. At the Museum of Modern Art, he serves on the Media and Performance Committee and is also the vice chair of the Friends of Education Patron Group. Mr. Lumpkin has advised public and private organizations on collecting and patronage and participated in discussion panels at art fairs, auction houses, and universities. Mr. Lumpkin was educated at Harvard and Yale, where he sits on the Dean's Council at the Yale School of Art. The Lumpkin Bokuzi family collection is the subject of a new book, Young, Gifted, and Black, a new generation of artists, and a nationwide traveling exhibition currently on view at Lehman College in New York City. Viet-Nu Nguyen has been curator of the Ovitz Family Collection in Los Angeles since 2007. She oversaw the design, construction, and installation of two collection buildings, a primary residence in Beverly Hills, where the majority of the Ovitz Family Collection is housed, and a beach residence in Malibu, where the collection's Sol LeWitt wall drawings have been installed. New has also worked on special projects with various artists, including Carol Beauvais, Sterling Ruby, and Ed Ruscha, and is currently working on a project with Sam McInnes. New received her bachelor's degree from Brown University and her master's degree from Harvard University, where she studied architecture and design history and theory. She's an architecture enthusiast and recently restored her home, the Johnson Residence by Harwell Hamilton Harris. It's a shame you guys are all such slackers, first of all. I'm very impressed with those bios. Well, I want to start by asking, over the past 6 months, we've experienced not only a global pandemic, an uprising recognizing deep-seated social and racial injustice in our country, but continued political unrest. These challenging times have provided time for reflection, but also immense financial struggle for artists, galleries, and institutions. Has this had an impact on how you collect? And feel free, anyone, to jump in. Marguerite, go ahead.
Sure. Yes, how could it not have an effect on how you collect? It has an effect on how you manage everything about your life, right, I think, unless you're some kind of person that's non-sentient, and I doubt they're on this call. I thought when this first started that this would be a time to slow down and that it would be a time to reflect on why you collect and what you really think is important. And I even had the goal of really learning my own collection. You know, sometimes we get so caught up in it all that you forget how much you love something and you want to know more about it. None of that has happened. it doesn't seem like things have slowed down at all. In fact, the temperature has gone up, the layers of intensity are laid down, and I think we're forced, well, we've had the opportunity, let me put it that way, to think about all the people that we care about in the art world and what they're going through, and try to challenge ourselves to figure out how to be supportive. And since art collecting is something that we all love, it's felt extremely nice to be able to do it at this moment when there's so much uncertainty. So I wouldn't say things for me have really changed, but I would say they've deepened. And I do find that a couple of what I would call major acquisitions for me feel darker. And that might be just more realistic, but they feel like they're forcing me to attempt to deal with what's going on around me. So that's my really serious story.
Were those works that were created within this time frame, or are they works that were created earlier and they just feel darker because of?
They're his older works. One
Okay.
is a Black Puppet by Jordan Wolfson, which you can put in many different positions, but it's a black puppet on a floor. And the other one is Fish Levice's big installation called The Raft, which feels apocalyptic to me, and that was done in 1989. So what all is on this raft that is just floating in the middle of nowhere with crocodiles and hippos surrounding it? It's whimsical and amusing, but it's also terrifying.
I agree with Marguerite, if I could jump in, just because I think that this period has made us think about art and think about our relationships, our community. I think for each of us as collectors and patrons, first and foremost, COVID first, and then I think the impact of Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd, the protests and the aftermath of that, I think impacted the art community in different ways. I think for me, I had sort of traced my time during this past 6 months as sort of having two phases. The first phase was sort of COVID, and I sort of tracked it through my conversations with artists, since I'm so often able to have more conversations with artists now. As Marguerite was saying, I think it's been a period where I've sort of doubled down on my connections with artists, with curators, with dealers, sort of bringing in my community even more so than normal, because now you can talk to anyone all the time and you can do 3 studio visits in one day if it's on FaceTime. But I think the first phase, it was interesting. My conversations with artists were very much about, staying, in the studio, being safe. Like your creative mission was in line with the social mission. In other words, like solo work, working on your own, not interacting, sort of what artists probably are used to more often than any of the rest of us. Sort of social distancing is a way of life for artists. So my conversations with artists were very much about what was happening inside the walls of the studio. And then after George Floyd, there was a shift in my conversations with artists. And then it began to be more about, artists were asking themselves and asking me and asking their peers, what can I do to help? How can I get out and join forces? Instead of working on my solo project, how can I collaborate and do something for a larger goal and purpose? And that's the moment when you began to see lots of artists doing benefit auctions. And, I think as a collector, I try to take my lead from artists as much as possible. And it was those conversations that helped me navigate the past 6 months. And it also led me to get involved in ways that I had not previously thought of, or maybe were not necessarily available to patrons. So, I think patrons, to Marguerite's point, I think we have to continue doing what we always do. We have to support artists. We have to support the institutions that support artists. But I think the past 6 months, there emerged new ways, and maybe more important ways, to really support the art community. And I feel like now the mission as a patron, and if, you know, as a collector who's driven by these goals and these values, is to support, you know, when museums are doing benefit auctions, when an artist is putting a work up for sale to benefit, a jail, something that's not necessarily specific to the art world, but something to benefit, you know, jail funds, or food for communities that wouldn't normally have it during this time, things like that. I think that's sort of given us a chance to redefine our role as collectors and patrons in this moment.
And Nu, how about you in your collecting for the Ovitz collection and the presentation as well?
I mean, it's interesting to hear Bernard and Marguerite talk about that, because, I mean, it's a job for me. So I have a different sort of angle that I'm coming into it. Maybe it doesn't define me so much as a person, this idea of patronage and an idea of social responsibility. I mean, I actually think my social responsibility comes in more as resisting these market forces that we are all involved in, whether or not we want to be involved in that. So that's been an interesting shift in my thinking, I think, in the past 6 months.
Okay. And in the sense that we're all now geographically more limited than ever before, Bernard, you were referencing, you know, being able to do 3 studio visits instead of, has your collection, or has even just what you're pursuing, going to see and exposing yourself to, has it seen a change in the way that you look at regional artists? Is it easier to be engaging with regional artists based on where you are or where you sheltered in place? Or not really?
I mean, I would say that in some ways, I mean, I was on a virtual collection visit last night. I was doing it, hosting it, and there was someone on the call who was from Canada, and it wasn't an artist. It was actually a collector whom I admired, someone whom I'd heard a lot about and whom I'd never had a chance to meet, and whose collection I would love to see. And I love the fact that we were able to connect virtually because of this situation. Normally the collection visit would have been in person in my home, and this person who lives in Canada would not have been able to be there. So I think the digital sort of revolution that's happening, or that has been sort of accelerated by COVID, is interesting. And I think there are some advantages to that. I think regionally speaking, it makes certain, it brings us closer together in some ways, but it also, is just another tool that I think as collectors, as Marguerite and I'm sure you both know, before the call started, we were talking about, our recent visits or lack thereof to galleries, and sort of, what is gained through these multiplicities of connecting virtually, but also what is lost, like what does not translate. And I use the example of visiting a gallery, and I went for a specific reason, the way you would in an online viewing room, right? You go to an OVR and you sort of have a specific reason to go. But what happened at the gallery was that there was a work that was off to the side that the dealer wasn't really planning on showing to me. And I didn't even realize that the dealer had sort of worked with that artist. And so the visit turned into a whole conversation about that artist that I happened to see, that work that was off to the side. When you're in an online viewing room, there's no work off to the side. Like, you're seeing exactly what they want you to see, no more, no less. And you're also not running into someone who, maybe a curator, or another collector, or say I see Marguerite or Nu, and I'm walking through the Armory and I see them and they're like, oh, look, Bernard, come check this artist out. And, I had my set itinerary the way you do now when you go to a virtual art fair, you have your set itinerary, but then you lose that moment. I would never get a chance to follow Marguerite's, suggestion and sort of have that happenstance of discovery. So I'm very conscious of the sort of the pros and the cons of the new sort of virtual reality that we are now in. I'd be curious to know what Nu and Marguerite, if they have similar sort of views on, what's gained and what's lost in the sort of digital space.
Well, first of all, I wanted to get back just to saying that for me, there has been focus on regional and artists and their galleries. So in Dallas, it's hard to have an art gallery. I mean, I did it 100 years ago. It's really hard. So when people can't come to their openings and, you know, for them to make sales, I think that's just a real tragedy. And so because we all want this ecology, this ecosystem to be as healthy as possible, I did make a particular effort to look at Dallas galleries that are located in Dallas. I don't know, you know, we all just do what we can do, right? But just to this moment of virtual, I was saying before we started that it's very hard for me because I'm a real touchy-feely person. I like to hug, and I like to kind of, I hope I don't get too close to people, but I like to be in the conversation with them. And I like to read the body language. In the same way, I like to look at works of art in the flesh, because I find myself thinking, you know, you get where you're turning your, you know, your computer or your phone or whatever, trying to get a sense of what that piece is like in space. What is the texture like, you know, will it be flat? Will it be dynamic? How big is it? You know, I mean, all those things that are, I think force you to think less about the power of the object itself and more about its physical presence. So yes, is it better than, you know, a sharp poke in the eye with a pair of scissors? Yes, but will I really look forward to having a more ambulatory, full complement of people to, you know, in the experience? Yeah. I don't know if that answered anything, but.
Yeah, no, it did. New, how about you?
I mean, it's been nice to be able to have lengthy conversations with people about art and not just, you know, oh, it's beautiful, or, you know, I mean, it can get as basic as that in our world. But I've been having like hour-long conversations with dealers now. I never did that. We never had the opportunity to do that. And so there is relationship building in this time in a different way. And we are taking leaps of faith by buying things, you know, sight unseen. But is it ideal? Of course not. It's definitely best to see things in person. And up until now, Michael and I would always see something in person before acquiring it. But, you know, we do want to be supportive of everyone, especially younger artists. I think this is a really hard time for younger artists to, you know, exhibit and get their name out. And so, you know, we've been buying pieces by artists we've never seen their works in person before, and that's really difficult to do, but it's a, you know, it's a leap of faith.
And for those of you who have, it sounds like you've bought online. Marguerite and Bernard, you've both bought online as well during this period?
I mean, go ahead, Marguerite. I have a funny story about that.
I was gonna say, there's probably no condition in which I wouldn't buy art. So yes, of course. But the one thing, I'm the oldest one on our panel, and I just want to give a shout out for the way I came up as a collector, which was through a gallery system, really. And the gallerists were the meeting places, they were the conveners, they introduced you to an artist, they kept the education process going, and therefore you had a relationship. I worry about that now with everything going online. I feel like I can take a flyer, just like I'm sure you all can, on buying something by an artist you've never seen before, because you've seen so much already, and not maybe of that artist, but of art in general. I mean, you have well-formed vocabulary and a mind palace. So I wonder how people that don't have that encyclopedia in their head of experiences, how they're finding buying art with this kind of constraint.
I mean, I think it's really an opportunity. Look, at any crisis, as people often say, every crisis is an opportunity. And, I really, to Marguerite's point, who came up, in this old school gallery system, that old school system was one that required you to actually spend some time going to places. And this is not something which I don't think needs to be sort of class specific or economic, whatever your economic wherewithal is. As I often tell collectors, if your budget is $1,000 a year or $100,000 a year, you can still do the work that will result in my view, a better collection and a better experience for you and a better contribution in the art world. I mean, I think, Marguerite uses the word ecosystem, and I often say, like, we're all citizens of the art world. And I think this is an opportunity for us to double down on good citizenship, as it were. And, so you can't visit, 10 galleries, in a weekend or in a month. So you visit 2, but you spend an extra amount of time there, like New was just saying, and you really get to know an artist's work, or you really get to know that dealer. Or say you can't visit, you can't, with this past spring in New York City, the big spring art gala season disappeared off the calendars. So maybe you can't go to 5 galas this year, but you do one, and you sort of make a really pointed effort to support that organization. Or because the galas are now virtual, you can actually go to more than 5. So you go to more, and you make contributions a little bit across the board to all of them. I think, this is a crisis, and this is, there are many sort of, challenging aspects of it, but I try to focus on the opportunities that it presents. And I think last but not least, I mean, artists, they still need the work to live in the world. They need the work to be talked about. They need to have conversations happening around the work. And, that's our job. And I feel like that's really important in now more than ever. And that can continue. We just have to be a little creative as to how that happens now.
And what do you think about the current online viewing rooms, both the galleries and the fair platforms that have existed? Are there some that you find more user-friendly, more appealing? You don't have to say names, but just the way, the ease of use and that sense of discovery, Bernard, in my conversations with collectors and galleries is missing. That's why in real life fairs or in real life visits to galleries, exactly what you just said. You're not going to see that piece that you glanced out of the corner of your eye. So are there things that are missing from them, and are there things that are there certain platforms that you feel work better and are maybe more likely to have you visit them and potentially purchase or at least learn something?
They're all getting better. I mean, some are really basic, and there's a charm and an ease to a really basic format too. And then others have become very natural. Like I was looking at the William Copley show at Casman online, and it was almost as if you were walking through the gallery, or at least your memory of that experience.
And what was it that made it feel? Was it virtual, or was it just?
Yeah, you actually went through the space, and it was very easy to navigate. I think we need a joystick. We need like an art stick for these online viewing rooms.
I've been the only one that struggles with that little 3D thing. I get lost.
Yeah.
I bump into the wall. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, exactly. Or you go through a wall sometimes, which doesn't make any sense. But they're getting better, which is it's been a short amount of time. I think it's hard to say, like, it's hard to make sense of the past 6 months because it's only been 6 months ultimately.
Right, and we were sort of an industry that came late to the digital. So
Yeah,
other
absolutely.
industry, yeah.
I agree with New. Maybe Marguerite Jordan Wilson should develop a virtual reality piece that involves that you can wear during your online viewing experience and sort of shape or control your own experience of
Wouldn't
the
that be
space.
wonderful? I think that'd be great.
That would be amazing.
And you wouldn't
Jordan,
have,
if you're listening.
yeah, Jordan, get on it. And you wouldn't have to wear high heels. Think about that.
Right. You can put pants. You don't have to wear pants.
It's a win-win.
Well,
I
Bernard
think
and
for me,
Marguerite
the
have
most
both. Oh, go ahead, Bernard.
No, I was just gonna say to sort of follow up on what you were saying, New, the most effective virtual, OVRs that I've seen are the ones that are artist driven in some way, and that may just be sort of my perspective as a collector too, just really being curious about and sort of starting from what the artist says or thinks about their work. Now, not all artists are super articulate, or not all artists sort of are interested in talking about their work, but the most convincing and effective online viewing rooms for me, and the ones that I think should remain, when things go back to normal, would be the ones where you have an artist sort of walking you through the space, either in voiceover or on camera, and really telling you about the work in a way that you wouldn't normally get to know. And I don't think dealers need to be afraid of collectors this is a safe way for collectors to get close to artists, right? For me, it just gives me a deeper appreciation and understanding of the work when I'm hearing it from the, straight from the artist's mouth, as it were.
I was thinking both Bernard and Marguerite have worked on or are working on collection catalogs. And that's something we've always struggled with. We've never done that at the Ovitz collection, but there was a time where we were thinking about doing a virtual reality version of it so that we could continually update. But, so much about the collection is actually going there and experiencing it in that home. And we were trying to replicate that experience as, effectively as possible, with like versions of Michael giving a tour versus me giving a tour versus an artist giving a tour, or, a museum director giving a tour of the collection. I mean, it might be a good time to revisit that idea, but, it's hard. We want to see things. We're so used to that. And I actually think not seeing things in real life, it just flattens everything out, and almost everything starts to look good at a certain point, because you're just like, oh, it's just level.
It's harder to be discerning, I think.
Yeah.
Plus just screen fatigue. I mean, just how many hours can we actually be looking intensely on a screen? I know I get tired. And so the times that I get sent something and you're looking at it virtually, when I really wake up is when it's a dealer that knows the collection and is sending something specific,
Right.
because they think it might make sense.
It's more targeted, the approach.
More targeted to go on large, multiple gallery sites, and with their thousands of options. That's kind of a heroic act, and to tackle all that. So I'm not as good at that, but I do want to do it because I don't want to be left out. But there is kind of you're right, a band that it all works in, from, you don't have those, oh, that's incredible, and you don't have that either.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I was speaking with a gallerist the other day, and they were talking about how they're going to do, I guess, for whatever fair is coming up in the spring, I forget, whether it's Freeze, I guess, in New York, and they have a space here in New York, so they're going to have part of the online viewing room, part of the gallery will be like a one of the artists that are included in the online viewing room will have space in the gallery. And so we were joking that what she should do during the time that the online viewing room is up is have sort of like someone walking by with a champagne cart, like in front of the installation in the room, in the gallery space, to sort of, you know, make the performance of the make the online viewing room kind of a performance in the gallery, as it were. And so that people would really experience what it's like to sort of, you know, have some of those things that we love so much about the art fair, like the champagne cart or the the sort of you know, crowds of people, or collectors chasing paintings, dealers chasing collectors, the fun stuff.
Hard to get that energy, right?
It's hard to get that energy when you're in an online viewing.
Champagne helps. Champagne helps.
I've
Well,
also
that's really interesting.
Actually, I've liked looking at the art more intently. Bernard, we figured out that Bernard's more of a people person, and he likes having those random interactions. But
Marguerite too.
It is really hard to go through an art fair. Marguerite was saying that the art, in an earlier conversation, that the art can suffer because of the social element. And I think that's been nice to actually focus on the art and not have to engage in small talk.
And I guess this is a question that I hadn't given to you ahead of time, but have you felt sort of a relief of the having to go to the biennials and the openings and the fairs? And has there been just that break for everyone? I think initially people were feeling like, oh, I can catch my breath. Marguerite, you said it's still been very busy, but has that been sort of refreshing? You know, for me, I was traveling all the time. I was going to lots of different fairs and openings and museum exhibitions. And initially it felt nice to have a moment, but now I'm kind of missing that travel. Have you experienced any of that as well, or?
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, I think most of us would get on a plane and go about anywhere if we felt like we could be safe to see about anything that was available. I think this has gone in phases, right? And we're in our third season, you know, of this, where there's actually the weather changes, the views change, and we're still here. And the thing that we don't understand is how long is this new normal, right? And so that gets very tricky in your mind. And for me, I have days where I would love to be in the middle of Documenta, whatever number it was, or, you know, in Munster or in Basel or at the Armory Show, or, you know, at Frieze. Going to London just seems exotic now. Will that ever happen again? It's been a long time for me since I've traveled to look at art, and I realize how elemental that was for me. And whereas, you know, we might huff and puff about having to make the effort, and, you know, I would give anything to make the effort now. So I'm gonna practice that gratitude the next time I get a chance to go. Be nicer.
You know, we'll appreciate it more, maybe.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Is all this helpful, Nicole, to you? I'm just curious. I mean, you know, my last great art gathering good time was at the Armory Fair. Maybe for many of us, you know, that was right before March 5th, and you know, I'm just curious whether what we're saying is sort of helpful to all of those in the art world, all of us who are thinking about, you know, the future of art fairs. If it's something that this is helpful, if this is shedding new light, is this taking the temperature of where we're all at right now in terms of art fairs of the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every conversation, and to New's point, to have these long conversations, because I've been going to galleries every week, picking a handful of galleries since they've been back open. And yeah, it used to be I would go in and maybe a principal was there, but maybe not. And now, you know, people are standing at the front door waiting for you to come and excited to see you. And you have all this time to have these really meaningful and helpful conversations, because we want to be of service to our art community. How are we going to serve you, the galleries best, the collectors best? How can we make it an experience where people feel safe to come and also, you know, want to come and have that in real life? We all know that there is no replacement for that interaction. I had a really great experience of going to Alexander Gray Gallery in Germantown a few weeks ago, and it was a Jenny C. Jones show. And you just can't look at those works online and see the beautiful texture and the vibrancy of the colors. That I think is why people are still craving that in real life experience. And to me, to watch people's reactions, I've been going to museums. My first time I was able to go see the Donald Judd show at MoMA that I thought was closed forever and I could never get to go to. And it was like a religious experience to be able to get in and see that. And also there happened to be not a lot of people there. So that never happens at MoMA. So I think the dialogue is, because things keep changing. So one person's online viewing room that's virtual is different than a digital, and everyone's going to have a different reaction to it. So for Marguerite, you know, she's walking into a wall, and New is saying, oh, it's kind of cool. I mean, you know, we all have different experiences with those different platforms. So we're just trying to talk to as many people as we can: artists, curators, collectors, gallerists, museum, you know, executive directors, to figure out how we have the benefit of having happened in 2020, one of the few fairs that happened. And we then, without, people said, you're so smart to have changed your dates. Well, it wasn't because of COVID that we changed our dates, but to move to September 2021, we have a lot of time. We had 18 months to think about this and what can a fair be moving forward, and how can we be, again, of service in a way to the art community, because so many people are struggling. So that's where we are in our conversations with everyone. And this time has been really helpful for that. And as much as I want to be on a plane, not being on a plane has allowed me to really be around New York, be on all the Zoom calls, have those conversations. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about institutions. You're all involved with museums in some capacity. Can you share with us something a museum has done during this period that you think was successful in connecting visitors to an experience, a digital experience that you've had, if you've had one?
I was thinking about that, and I think for me that moment when 13 museums came together and did the Arthur Jafa streaming of Love is the Message, Message is Death. I think in the middle of all the protests and Black Lives Matters being at the forefront of some of our thinking, as it should be, I found that very powerful. And I think that was in June, maybe, or maybe July time.
It's all, I know, right?
I'm involved with the ICA LA, and they have an initiative called Field Workshops, where they open up the space to grassroots organizers. They've done programs around homelessness and voting and the census and immigration reform. But earlier this month, they opened up the program to an organization called Dancing Through Prison Walls, and a dancer named, I think, Suchi Bronfman performed pieces that were choreographed by incarcerated artists in a medium security prison in California. So I mean, I think there's a lot of innovation, and there's a lot of community organizing now that is happening, and that's really interesting to me.
I mean, I agree, just to second what Marguerite and New is saying. I mean, I'm thinking of things like the Pictures for Elmhurst benefit, which happened early on, Project Eat, which benefits sort of helps bring food. I know artists who are involved in that and bringing food to communities that have been sort of separated from healthy food channels because of the pandemic. as far as museums, Marguerite, that's a great example. I had forgotten about that, but the Arthur Jaffa, the sort of simultaneous, that's when like simultaneity and multiplicity are really like in the service of something really good and important and powerful that you really couldn't do like live in real life, right? You can't get everybody together at the same time or on the same day and broadcast a video which makes everybody think about things at the same time. So that's an example, I think, of the digital revolution really serving, in the service of something good and important. I think organizations like we collectors and patrons need to think creatively, I think, and to continue to support artists. I know for Skowhegan, the School of Painting and Sculpture that I'm fortunate to serve on the board of, we had to cancel, like many schools and residencies, we had to cancel our program this past summer, but we paid our faculty, who are mostly artists, and the staff so that so that they could sort of continue their, we maintained our sort of, commitment to them, and, symbolically showed our support to them and their work and the commitment that they had made to us. And, it was an opportunity for us to make some improvements on campus, which will benefit later generations of artists. So, I think you sort of just have to be prepared to pivot and then lean into the new reality and think how best you can support, support the situation, whatever the new reality it brings.
And in an Art News article, and also during this conversation, Bernard, you've said that while collecting can be seen as a solitary pursuit for some, that for you it's about collaboration and community. There are galleries now who are really banding together. So Platform LA is a great example of, the Los Angeles galleries coming together and really showcasing exhibitions and artists. I just read that San Francisco, I think, just launched one as well with 8 galleries. So how do you feel about that? Have you looked at those types of initiatives, and do you think that is something that's beneficial for you as a collector to see that kind of collaboration and community amongst the galleries?
Well, if I may say, I don't think that it's so beneficial to me as a collector, but gosh, it has to be wildly helpful to the collaborators. So anything, again, that just strengthens, nourishes, binds, keeps us all thriving, and it seems like a generous word, I think is what we have to do. And I think that's the future. We were pointed that way, really, but pre-COVID. And it could also be more interesting in a certain way, not to have every visual experience be so siloed and so reflective of one gallery's point of view, or one artist's point of view, but to kind of have some threads that runs through that. If they do it that way, could be quite interesting.
I think, Nicole, your question for me sort of is part of a larger question, which is about consolidation, which seems to be happening also. And I think the partnerships that are happening with smaller galleries banding together, or I saw it just today. Earlier today, I was in the Lower East Side, and a gallery space that formerly housed 1 gallery now has 3. So, I think that's just smart economics. And, I think that's, galleries thinking creatively. I think one thing that I will be watching for is sort of the danger that, and again, I'm speaking from just my own perspective here as someone who focuses on emerging artists and the sort of ecosystem around emerging artists, which are smaller galleries, emerging galleries, younger curators, smaller museums. One concern I have is in some of the galleries that have closed or have consolidated or are joining forces, one concern I have is that those systems of support for artists early in their career, might disappear or might become diluted, when someone who works at a smaller gallery, the gallery closes, they get a great job at a larger gallery, without naming any names, who knows whether that larger gallery will sort of have the resources or the wherewithal or the connections or the interest or the clients who care to support an artist who has not yet been proven by the market, but who needs collectors and dealers and shows to become proven by the market. So, you know, I think it's all necessary, the consolidation, the collaborating, I think that's all good. I'm watching to see if there continues to be the support that happened previously when there was a full spectrum of entry points for artists at all stages of their career.
And how about you, Nu? So have you said Nu has only been back in the gallery since last week, right? That was your first.
Yeah, that was my first gallery outing was last week. I mean, it feels good. Like all these things feel good. You know, it feels good to see art. It feels good to see all these galleries working together. I think that is a positive sort of outcome of this situation that we're in. I thought it was interesting with Bernard talking about all levels of one's career, because there is a lot of excitement and energy when you're just learning about someone, and then later in life there's this sort of memorialization of that artist's work, and then there's that meaty chunk of the mid-career that is really hard for people to continuously support. And I think that's sort of hard right now, I think, to get through, to push through when you're not seeing things in real life.
Yeah. So I think we've touched on a couple of the other questions that I had, but I guess, what do you miss most about the in real life experience of either art fairs or biennials or studio visits and museum events? We've talked a little bit about obviously seeing art in person. Bernard, for you, it's also that energy, champagne. Anything else that we're missing from those experiences? One of the questions we have is that, you know, will there be a realization that so many art fairs are not so necessary, and there'll be fewer art fairs and a return to more of the old style gallery system, or will it empower more artists to have direct contacts with collectors? I certainly don't feel that the art fairs are going to become obsolete because of this situation. I think now more than ever, people want to have that in real life experience and that sense of discovery, which you really get at an art fair. But please feel free to share your opinions about that.
We'll probably just go to fewer of them. I mean, they're going to exist, but we just can't attend every single one. It's just not possible. And it's also, I mean, it's just not good for the environment, unfortunately. But yeah, they'll exist. We'll go to them. We'll enjoy them. We'll learn from them, and we'll buy things, you know.
Yeah, maybe it'll just be a leaner, meaner art world in some ways. The same thing goes for art. What you say about art fairs goes for galas. I've heard similar conversations around galas. Like, do we really need galas once a year? You know, these huge galas where organizations spend a lot of money producing, and maybe it's not the best business model to begin with in the first place. Maybe there are other ways to generate ongoing support for organizations. So that's something which I think is being discussed in other ways too. Marguerite, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, maybe we'll get closer to my ideal art fair, which is, as you remember, just collectors going through without any dealers at all. And just being able to really focus on the art. And since we would be kind of in COVID, the tail of COVID, maybe you get a time ticket to go in and then re-engage with the gallerist some other time. So I'm sure, look, there's a will to survive for everybody involved in this. And I think that maybe this is where the pendulum starts to swing back just a little bit. again, I'm old school, but you started having so many opportunities to go to art fairs that maybe they stopped being as interesting for some of us. They just felt overwhelming and you kind of pull back. But if we had fewer and more high quality and maybe with different profiles, that could be really interesting. And as you said, maybe we are conscious of the geography of where they are and when they are so that we don't have to burn up the planet. There could be some really creative thinking around this that I think might energize us all. So I'm going to leave that as my lemonade.
I think it's also hard for artists to constantly be producing in this way. It's just unnatural.
Right. This has probably been a very difficult time for artists, but in some ways to have that break from constantly having to produce for fairs, for shows. Yeah, I think we'll see some interesting art that's come. Well, we're already seeing it. Some interesting art that's come from this period.
And Nicole, if I could just say one more layer of this,
of course,
like the pie crust, is we're coming up to a big election, and depending on how all that shakes out, this could feel normal right this minute compared to what it's going to feel like in December. So I don't know how the art world will transverse that landscape, but I would think you're going to see some very interesting art coming out on the other side of this, or that would be my hope, even more than we already have seen.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Frightening, but good point.
Yeah.
Bernard, did you have any kind of last thoughts on that?
No, I agree with what my esteemed co-patrons here are saying, New and Marguerite. I think we should just look to artists and support what they see as what we should be looking at. Artists, they'll show us the future before we even know. So I think I'm hopeful that whatever that future is, that we'll get a preview of it if we're smart and we know where to look for it.
Someone wanted to know, Bernard, what is the name of the collection in Canada you're interested in? But it was someone in Canada looking at your collection, correct?
Yeah, it was someone who was on the call watching a virtual collection visit that I was doing. It was a collector. Yeah.
Right.
A well-known Canadian collector who supports some of the same artists that I do, focuses on great support for institutions and artists of color, and yeah.
And tell us a little, I want Marguerite and Bernard to each share a little bit about their books that are, Bernard, your book is out, and Marguerite, yours is coming out. Tell us a little bit about.
Well, first of all, I want to salute Bernard for getting a book out.
Oh my God.
that may be beyond my ability. I hesitate to say too much about it. I hope it will be something that will be of interest to people, but it really started out because of trying to archive some stories about the collection, especially the stories collecting with my late husband, because we have a bequest to the Dallas Museum of Art. And, I live daily with this idea I could get hit by a bus or fall off a sailboat out here. And, then everything just, a lot of stuff is going to go to the museum. And I would like for them, future curators, to have some sense of why these things were important to us. And then also there's just been a huge bifurcation, if you will, that's been 15 years since Robert died. So, there's 15 years of me collecting on my own and opening up the collection in ways that surprise even me. So what's that all about? So I'm finding the book, we didn't want it to be, a coffee table vanity project, but rather a deep, a reflective tome, I guess, about, what is collecting like for just your run-of-the-mill collector, and what are those stories that might engage new collectors as they come up, knowing that they don't have to do it perfectly, that there's a lot of stuff that makes up the end result, a lot of experiences. So I'm not explaining it very well, but I hope we'll get it out. I know that I have some teammates that are going to make sure that it is much better than my ramblings that I just did. So.
And what is the scheduled time frame, or is that shifting based on the circumstances?
Oh, of course, it's shifting. You know, we're so hoping to have it done this fall, but now I'm thinking Q1 maybe of 2021. Photography in the time of COVID is just, if you just want to get kind of pedestrian about it, that's challenging. I will also say that what some people call high-res images are not necessarily so high-res. So, but I hope it's a nuanced, the art will be, I think, tell the story. And then I feel like I'm the human backboard for the telling of the story. So hopefully it'll be interesting.
Great.
If not, I'll have a bunch of them in my closet and you all can come to the house and I'll just hand them out.
No, it'll be great. Good luck with that. Bernard, how about you?
Good. Well, I was using as the stand for my iPad here, the book itself, which is Young, Gifted, Black. So, and I'm showing it because, you know, I'm covering my face with it because this is really an opportunity for me to sort of, it touches on a lot of what we talked about today. First of all, you know, I talked about how important it is as a collector and a patron for me, the community and the ecosystem, as Marguerite said, that we all are part of. This traveling exhibition and book, Young, Gifted, and Black, was a way for me to sort of say thank you and to sort of engage all of the sort of people that have supported my collecting, the curators, the artists, the dealers that have enriched my life and that have, you know, the collection for me has always been a way to discover about myself, to teach my children about the world, about themselves. And so for me, this project has been about sort of a thank you to a lot of people. And we really wanted to put it first and forward to be artist driven. And, you know, the editor of the book, Antoine Sargent, and the co-curators of the exhibition, Antoine and Matt Wyckoff, really started with the artists. And we asked each artist if they wanted to, for instance, have someone write about their work, or if they wanted to write about their work themselves. And in each case, we got really amazing, you know, thoughtful responses. And it was also a way to sort of give artists, you know, aside from reproducing their work in a book, it was a way to sort of let them make a new work. And in terms of what they contributed, it wasn't just like my work is about this. It was a new piece of artwork. It was a poem. It was a reflection. So for me, the book really is sort of it's a way to take something which, you know, has a limited audience in my home, as open as my home is and as social as I am. You know, there are many places in the country where people don't get to see contemporary art, particularly contemporary art by artists of African descent. And, you know, I take as the Studio Museum, which is, you know, where I'm a trustee and sort of my home institution, you know, the museum's mission is sort of, you know, I try to adopt that to my own purposes and to try to spread the gospel of, you know, artists of African descent around the country in places big and small. So the traveling exhibition will go to places that, you know, otherwise we wouldn't get a chance to see this work. And it's young artists, it's for young people. I'm thinking of it as sort of like a college tour. And when the colleges open up again, the exhibition will get to travel and find homes in new places.
Great, wonderful. Well, we are at time, but I want to leave everyone with an answer to the one question, which is for younger people or people who are just starting out with collecting during this weird time, but they've seen things digitally and their interest has been piqued. Do you have words of wisdom, advice for people who are just getting started out in collecting?
Well, I think we need to remember that there's always the editing process. So don't be terrified, have courage, and step out there. I think getting started is always, that Kierkegaardian notion of just get started and things will begin to form around you that will help you. But there's always, in all of life, in every category, we edit, right? And so what if you make a mistake? I think that's part of the journey. So.
Great.
What?
New,
Yeah.
Bernard?
No, New, you go first. Go ahead.
I mean, buy what you like and maybe find someone like me to help you through that journey. Like, create jobs. It's kind of, it's cool to think that there's that possibility. Growing up, I didn't think that you could do what I do for a living.
Yeah, great.
That's great. I love that, New. I think creating jobs, I think editing, Marguerite, I think for me, that means train your eye, do your research, learn what your passion is. And by that, it means necessitating making decisions and saying no to certain things and yes to things, go deep with what you really care about and are interested in, and gather around you. So that's following Marguerite's point about editing. Like, learn to be a great editor, learn to be able to see what work makes sense for you, for your collection, for the artist. And to New's point about creating jobs, I love that idea that we collectors could somehow create jobs and opportunities for other people through what we do. I think I think that's just a great idea. I've never sort of thought of that or heard about that, but obviously, there's always, collecting is and by extension, being a patron and supporting the institutions which support the artists that we collect, it's a very, there's a lot happening in the space right now. And a lot of people are now curating their own, curating now is sort of like a cultural term, which is being applied in all sorts of ways and places. That I think, having an eye to supporting artists and the message and the voices and the vision that artists have is becoming more and more acceptable, is becoming more mainstream. And I think we collectors, really should think about the opportunities that we could be giving other people, whether it's, helping someone build a collection, whether it's helping, a curator put together an exhibition, whether it's, helping raise money for an artist to produce a certain kind of work. I think there are many young people today, just based on my response that I'm hearing from Young, Gifted, and Black, who are interested in getting involved in art. And I think, the old view of collectors as kind of just hanging back and kind of just reaping all the benefit and having all the fun and the easiest part of the art world, I think no longer applies. And I think it's not even true. I think fun is when you engage other people. Fun is when you have an impact on someone's life. Fun is when you create a job for someone. So I appreciate New and Marguerite, both of you, for saying what you just said now.
Thank you. That's a great way to end. I want to thank Marguerite, Bernard, and New very much for their insights and for their time today. I want to thank the audience for watching. And for those of you who did not see, the Armory Show launched our new look yesterday. So please check out our website. We not only have a new look, but if you haven't heard, we're moving to the Javits Center, September 9th to the 12th, 2021. We have some exciting changes in store based on all the conversations we're having and the feedback we're getting. So keep an eye out also for our next Armory Live Talk in November. And to Marguerite's point, vote. Thank you all so much for being a part of today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be on with you guys.
Thank you, Marguerite. Thank you, Thank you, Nicole, for bringing us together.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.